Hello and welcome to the garden. Well, I am stood in our north-facing border, and this is an interesting part of the plot because ordinarily you imagine that a shady north-facing bed isn't going to be that useful, but I think a lot of the time gardening books and general advice underestimates the value of a shady or part shady border. And we've had great crops of leafy greens. The brassicas love it here. We've even had decent crops of peas and broad beans, things that one might not expect to do so well in the what is a fairly shady spot. The other thing that was traditionally grown against a north-facing wall, if you think back to the sort of like the Victorian kitchen gardens, the old walled gardens, they would put the sour cherries on this wall. So normally with cherries we're thinking of sweet cherries, and they really want to be in a sunny spot, but the sour cherry is perfectly happy on the north wall. Perhaps if you put them in a sunny spot, maybe they'd get a little bit more sweetness to them, but I have had a little taste of these and they're not very sour. Obviously they're tart, that's the nature of the cherry, but they're perfectly nice just to munch on. They're not, it's not like they're really sour. This is the first year that they're giving us a crop. I mean, there were a few last year, so I've got two here. This is a Morello and the other is I think it's Montmorency. Very popular I think in the States, but originally a French variety, and they're two slightly different types. So there are the Morellos and the Amarels. They're quite closely related, but slightly different sorts, and I've got one of each here. There are funny ideas about where the name Morello came from, but it's almost certain in fact that Morello and Amarel both come from the Latin for bitter, which makes a lot of sense. But anyway, these are cropping right now and it's time to take a harvest. Now, I've just used this EnviroMesh stuff here to keep the birds off. Net wouldn't work very well here. For netting to work, I'd have to have some sort of frame that kept the net away from the fruit, because otherwise they'll just peck through it. But the mesh here works perfectly well. It just happens that we had a couple of big pieces of mesh that had come off of the beds and we could deploy them here, but otherwise mesh is pretty expensive. I mean, it's good stuff, and if good quality mesh will last for many years, but one might not wish to put mesh here, in which case you'd want to keep the net well away from the fruit, otherwise the birds will take them, as they did last year. There weren't many on it last year. This is its first year giving us a decent crop, so I didn't net them last year, and as a consequence I didn't get to eat them. But this year I'm going to. So I will unclip the net. It seems to have been reasonably successful, and have a look at the harvest. These clips are dead handy in the garden for all sorts of purposes, but yeah, really useful to have a load of clips for net and mesh and such. So there's lots of fruit on here, and these are in pretty good condition. I'm going to take them off with the stem attached, and Oh, properly stuck on there. I don't like to just tug them off. I don't want to damage the wood at all. But there's one thing I will have to do here. Yeah, I've got some aphid on there. See, I don't need the tip of that. I will pinch that out. Oh, got snips. That's one way to deal with the aphids. We did have a bit earlier on, and I gave it a bit of soft soap, but some has returned. Usually we have a lot of ladybirds, and we have had them, but I don't know where they are right now. I think they've had their generation and have cleared out by the look of it. And well, I don't see any ladybird larvae on here, so I will have to give these another spritz. But one interesting thing on here is to look at where the fruit are coming, and I'm going to need to prune these. In fact, you might see that this is a bit of a mess, and it is. It's a bit untidy, and the reason is that I haven't tied any of this stuff back into place. And after they were pruned, I mean, a year ago, I should have tied them in neatly, and then this would all look nice and tidy, but I didn't get around to it, so I've just left it, and that's why this looks pretty scruffy right now. But they will need pruning, and they can be pruned now any time after taking the crop. But it's always interesting to see exactly where the crop is coming from. Let me bring the camera in closer and I'll show you what I mean. So I've just taken a cluster from there, and this is old wood. You can see that it's 1 year old wood. This grew off of this stem last season. This is all the new young lovely wood, and this wood here is the oldest that bore a few last season. So this is the 1 year old wood, and that is where this year's crop is at. And again, on this piece, got this little cluster here. That's on 1 year old wood. This is 1 year old wood. The older wood, the 2 year old wood, doesn't have anything, and it will be the same all over the tree. This year's wood, obviously, that doesn't have anything, but this is where the crop will be next season. This wood here, this 1 year old wood, it's fruiting this year. Next year it will have nothing. So the growth of a sour cherry is pretty much like that of the peach. This wood will never fruit for me again. It is now useless. So the only reason to leave a piece of old fruited wood on the tree is if it's carrying branches into an empty part of the fence here. Then you'd leave it in place, and then you'd take the new 1 year old wood, side shoots, whatever, off of this, and this would become part of the framework, or they sometimes refer to those as scaffold branches. But otherwise, this wood, after I've taken this fruit, this wood serves no useful purpose. So when looking at the pruning, and I don't know when I'm going to get round to it. Ideally, I'd prune it now as soon as I've taken the crop off, but I'm not going to get round to it, and I will do this later in the year. But I will come back when I do, I hope, and film that. But the idea will be to cut out the older wood and tie in the new. So this is new wood here. This could fruit next year. This also could fruit next year. So I could keep that bit, or I can cut this back down that stem. This is new, and these will give me the crop next year. But you have to go over the whole tree doing that, looking at where the fruiting wood is going to come for next season. This is new wood that I want to keep, and so on. So you cut out a proportion of this old stuff. You can cut it back and get new shoots come out, but you don't want too much of this wood here. So what next season will be 2-year-old wood. You don't want too much of that, because that is unproductive stuff. Only this new young growth is going to fruit at all next season. So my job today is just to take the harvest and I'll take down the net and maybe give it a little squirt of soft soap on the ends there where the aphids are still gathered. Hopefully I can come back and film the pruning and tying in of the morello later in the season, but that is it for this video. Thanks ever so much for watching, and bye for now.